Hello and welcome to the podcast taking you beyond the pitch and inside the sports news stories. I'm Rob Harris and this is Sport Unlocked. This week we'll ask, how should horse racing respond to the Sheikh Mohammed scandal? Why should we be concerned about yet another attempted Russian doping cover-up? And what are the challenges facing the new boss of the Tokyo Olympics? Plus, we'll bring you some of the key clips from the FT Business of Football Summit and we'll analyse what we learned about the future of TV rights and the new Champions League format. That might sound a familiar issue for the pod, but we're getting weekly developments as these talks intensify. And talking alongside me on the pod again, episode 5, is Martyn Ziegler, and alongside us, Tariq Panja. Ziegs, how you doing?
Yeah, all good, Rob. Nice to see you again, Tariq. We've had another busy week in lockdown, but it's certainly there's no putting your feet up, is there? It seems absolutely relentless, the sports news over the last few weeks, and yeah, it's continued.
And once again this week, we're discussing the fallout from a BBC Panorama investigation. It's centred on Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. He's the hereditary ruler of Dubai and is also the Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates. He's also the founder of the Godolphin horse racing stable based at Newmarket. More than 130 of his horses are trained here in Britain and he's on friendly terms with the Queen. But there is deep concern about the whereabouts of one of his daughters. Princess Latifah was detained by commandos off the coast of India in 2018 after she tried to flee Dubai on a yacht. The BBC and Sky as well have released excerpts from video diaries that she said were recorded in a locked bathroom in a Dubai villa where she's being held. On Friday, the United Arab Emirates Embassy in London said that media coverage was not reflective of the actual position and she is being treated at home. But it's only a year since a judge in London ruled that Sheikh Mohammed had conducted a campaign of fear and intimidation against his estranged wife, Princess Haya, and had ordered the abduction of 2 of his daughters, including Latifah. Now, this is an issue far bigger than horse racing, but how much should the sport be scrutinising Sheikh Mohammed's ongoing involvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus has been back on. There was the court case with Princess Haya last year, and now BBC Panorama have obtained videos of his daughter Latifah saying that the Sheikh is keeping her effectively as a hostage in Dubai and locked up. The United Nations have got involved, and the focus really now in terms of sport is. He is such an important part of horse racing in Britain and also in the United States. He is still a honorary member of the Jockey Club of the UK. He is a full member of the Jockey Club of America. So this is somebody who's deeply involved in the sport. Both the British Horse Racing Authority and the Jockey Club have refused to comment. But I think there's going to be really renewed focus now when lockdown's lifted and race owners start appearing back at races. Is he going to be welcomed back into the arms of the racing community? Because there's been some serious adverse publicity for Godolphin, and I think there's some questions for the authorities to answer.
There's a wider point as well here, maybe, that he's also the ruler of Dubai, which has been kind of at the forefront of that region, sponsoring sports events and sports teams around the world. I mean, you only have to look at football shirts of some of the biggest teams in Europe emblazoned with the words "Fly Emirates." From Roma, Arsenal Stadium, for example, AC Milan, Real Madrid, PSG, until very recently, all the big capital cities have had these links to the Emirates. It'd be interesting whether these stories or whether this kind of nasty situation, the human rights angle, starts cutting through as it gets discussed more and more.
Because of the UAE and Dubai in particular being quite fortunate to escape the scrutiny that, say, Qatar has, the intense focus on Qatar human rights and association with their sponsors, as we talked about last week with the Bayern Munich fans concerned about Qatar Airways and their association with Bayern Munich. But, seemingly there has been less of a focus on the fact you've got the Emirates Stadium, the Emirates FA Cup, and yet serious allegations now, particularly around Sheikh Mohammed and the right situation generally in the UAE.
This story with Latifah is actually kind of it's such a Hollywood thriller as well. In what happened initially, she tried to escape. She didn't have a passport, and it turns out her capoeira teacher became her friend, a Finnish woman. and they somehow engineered a way to get on a boat and escape around 2018, and had thought they'd made it. Were off the coast of India, where Indian special forces, apparently acting on the request of the United Arab Emirates, stormed the boat and managed to sort of take Latifa away. It's such a kind of terrifying ordeal, and the story is so dramatic that it would be hard for people to forget this one. And I guess when you're trying to, have an image of a tolerant, sports-loving nation, these kind of stories and the nature of them might make people think twice.
This Emirates sponsorship it's like one step away, isn't it? Because although it's a state company, actually, when you're talking about horse racing, it's the man himself. That's why I think that's a particular issue for the racing industry.
And in terms of Princess Haya as well, she's a very well-known figure to all of us in the world of sport. The fact she's been president of the International Equestrian Federation, she's worked on the FIFA campaigns of her brother, Prince Ali of Jordan, when he was running for the FIFA presidency. So there are many significant figures in the world of sport who have been associated with Princess Haya. So, they should be concerned.
Yeah, she was very active in her brother's campaign, wasn't she? And she actually spoke very well in terms of trying to bring a new approach to the whole FIFA politics and try and end the old Blatter era. And they were unsuccessful, but actually she was pretty impressive, actually.
With horse racing, do you think ultimately it'll be down to money as usual? Though, Godolphin is perhaps the biggest investor in jobs, and it's not an enormous industry. It sort of needs these figures to fuel it. I don't know how many hundreds of jobs are related to Godolphin and Sheikh Mohammed's investments. Is that why everyone's so quiet at the moment? No one wants to talk, it seems, at all from that industry.
Sure. I mean, actually, Godolphin are one of the partners of the Jockey Club, one of their commercial partners. So they are intrinsically linked together financially as well. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the end result of this is you might see Sheikh Mohammed moving away in formal terms from racing. But Godolphin will continue to be owned by the UAE, and it's whether he is actually the figurehead or not. That might be the way around it, but I think it's pretty. If you were sitting in the seats of power in horse racing, I think you'd be pretty uncomfortable about the situation now.
Probably one of the things that's helped the situation in terms of the Queen is the fact that the pandemic preventing her going to the racing, Sheikh Mohammed going to the racing, because they'd often be seen together at Ascot, and that would have been the uncomfortable association if she'd been associated with him, seen with him after the court ruling. But the fact that they're not attending probably, for now, keeps the royal family at a slight distance, but the question is how long that continues for.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a story in the Times after the court case last summer saying that actually the royal family had been given sort of fairly clear instructions that they should not be photographed together. So I don't think that situation is likely to arise now, even when lockdown is lifted.
And we still await a thorough response from the world of horse racing over its close association with Sheikh Mohammed. Now, moving on to the world of the Olympics, and we now know for the next two games, the Russian team and athletes will be officially branded ROC. That stands for Russian Olympic Committee. At the last games, the winter ones in 2018, Russian competitors were known as Olympic athletes from Russia. This is all because they can't officially compete as Russia as part of the state-backed doping scheme punishment. And just this week, we had yet another case punishing Russians for a doping cover-up. This time, 5 Russian athletics officials were banned. It was after a deception was uncovered involving a fake medical clinic in a demolished building and made-up claims about an athlete's car crash. Tariq, tell us more.
Yeah, this was a remarkable one. We've seen over the years, remarkable stories, lots of bizarre incidents, but this one ranks right up there. The top high jumper at the time, Daniil Lysenko, failed to tell the authorities where he would be, so it would be a whereabouts failure in the world of anti-doping. You get 3 of those and you face a 2-year ban, and he was faced with this predicament. So what did they do? They said, there's a reason for this. I was in hospital. I was feeling unwell. I was in hospital. And here are the medical certificates to show this situation I was in. The thing is, track and field has one of the best investigatory departments in all of sport, the Athletics Integrity Unit. And they said, well, okay, can we get some more detail? Can you send us all your paperwork? And that set up a real panic in Russia. They had to send this guy in for tests at a different hospital because the one they suggested he was in was fake. An entire fake hospital, fake doctors, fake medical certificates. The story totally fell apart when the AIU managed to get hold of emails and phones and computers. And it just shows the lengths that Russia is still going to. And this happened right at the moment Russia was trying to end its suspension, years-long suspension from World Athletics. They were in talks at that very moment of getting back into the collective, but getting Russian athletes to wear Russian vests, getting back into track and field. Meanwhile, on the sidelines, from the president of the Russian Athletics Federation down, they're involved in this most bizarre scheme, which involved the athlete even asking to see the hospital, taken to a place that here's the hospital, and it turned out to be a pile of bricks. It was a building site. Total farce. Cracking story, though.
So is the because World Athletics appear to have a more stringent ban than any other federation, what does that mean for the Olympics if that goes ahead?
They still will have the most. They still will have the most stringent ban. World Athletics are pretty much the only federation in global sport that have held the line and have punished Russia for that massive doping scheme. So come the Olympics, they'll only be allowed to send a maximum of 10 participants to the games, which is far fewer than they would in any of the other sports that they would qualify for. And this story that we highlighted is a big reason why.
And that's the thing, because yes, there was criticism over the then IAAF almost a decade ago now over their inaction over Russian cases. You know, even Seb Coe questions over did it show a lack of curiosity. But I think what we have seen in recent years is athletics standing out as the ones to rigorously go after Russia, and particularly the Athletics Integrity Unit. And yes, we might spend a lot of time on this pod questioning inaction by sports bodies in pursuing cases, but here we seem to cautiously welcome the fact that they do pursue with rigor.
Yeah, and it's not only been Russia either. They got it's not focused on Russia too. Let no one be under any kind of illusion that this whole thing is about catching Russia in the act. They've gone after big targets. The main focus of the AIU is going to check up on elite athletes, the very top. And it was the AIU, let's not forget that, was the organization that investigated Christian Coleman, the US 100-meter world champion and the favorite for the gold at Tokyo. He's now going to be missing those games after being banned for a similar situation, 3 whereabouts failures in a calendar year. And Christian Coleman won't be going to the US. And again, that's thanks to the work of the Athletics Integrity Unit under a lot of pressure from institutions in the US.
Well, by the Olympics this summer, we hope to finally resolve another issue. That's what the Champions League will look like from 2024. And we've got a better idea this week of how some of the arguments are shaping up on all sides after the Financial Times Business of Football Summit. We heard from the European Leagues Organisation, the European Club Association, and various other clubs and financial experts from across the world of football. Now, from what we listened to virtually, what new did we discover about what the shape of the Champions League will look like and just how those talks are going?
Yeah, I thought it was a really significant week, actually, because what we heard in some detail was from Charlie Marshall, the Chief Executive of the European Clubs Association, and Lars Christer Olsen, the president of the European leagues. Now they're the sort of two main bodies who are going to feed back into UEFA, and Charlie Marshall made absolutely clear that the European Clubs Association is 100% behind the reform plans, and including this very controversial idea of having this safety net where you can have a couple of clubs who get into the Champions League each year, not based on their sporting merit, but just on the fact that they've had a high coefficient because of their previous record in Europe. So it just became absolutely clear that to me anyway, that the ECA and UEFA have been together in this. They've put this together themselves because it's something that will suit both of them. I think it's a pretty big departure. I can't think of any other football event where you get entry to a tournament just based on the fact that you've had a good record previously. I think it's a pretty significant departure. And UEFA should be very careful about going down this road, in my view. On the other hand, there is the pragmatist view. If they don't do this, then things could be much worse, and you have clubs breaking away.
Well, let's hear now from some of the key players. First, Charlie Marshall. He's the chief executive of the European Club Association, and he talked up the importance of the elite clubs to the Champions League.
It's not the sort of greedy clubs taking all the money. It's the greedy clubs. It's the clubs who are often labelled as that. But they're really the ones that drive the value. And if we get the system of distributing the value right, then we should create stability.
Well, that's the view of the club's representative body. But the chief executive of the Bundesliga, Christian Seifert, isn't pleased at all with the action of some of the powerful clubs, particularly as he's seen all these potential talks about a breakaway Super League.
The brutal truth is that a few, not all of them, but a few of these so-called super clubs are in fact, I would say, poorly managed cash-burning machines who were not able, in a decade of incredible growth, who were not able to not even come close to a somehow sustainable business model. At the end, they're threatening UEFA and trying to create some kind of pressure to get more money and to force UEFA to do some changes and to give them more money. But in fact, no matter if it's a signing fee for a Super League or more money from the Champions League, at the end they will burn this money like they burned it the last 10 years. And except of threatening UEFA every few years, they should rather think about developing a sustainable business model.
Christian Seifert there, and it did seem, though they didn't name them, that he might be referring to the heavily indebted Barcelona and Real Madrid in terms of pushing for the Super League, Tariq.
Yeah, it was a forthright intervention. These conferences aren't really known for people speaking so bluntly. Often you have to sort of parse the words carefully or to figure out what they really mean. But he didn't seem to leave much doubt, and he made a good point as well in some ways, because he essentially said, even if these teams go in a Super League, they don't know how to manage themselves. So all this additional revenue they're going to make, all this money, they'll just waste it. So this isn't beneficial for football in any way. And of course, he's obviously got an agenda. He's the chief executive of a major football league, and if there is a breakaway, his league will be one of the leagues that is damaged. So it's a game of self-interest here, but. Arguably, you could say, yeah, he was quite honest. If you look at the numbers at Barcelona in particular, they are, at the moment at least, a cash-burning machine.
Lars Christer Olsen, he was saying, actually, what you need to do from the European League's perspective, I mean, he's also talking from a sort of their self-interest and their members' self-interest, is to have the champions of Scotland and Denmark given an automatic place, not the sixth-place team in England and Spain. Which is what you can. That's what you would expect him to say. But what do you think of this argument that UEFA has to be pragmatic? It has to accept the fact that the big clubs do drive the commercial interest, they do drive the broadcast rights, and that it's right that they should have some sort of return, because they prop up the pyramid. I mean, what do you think about that argument? I mean, part of me thinks there is some sort of merit in that, but part of me also thinks it should be sporting merit too.
And how much is driven by the excitement of changing dynamics of the Champions League when you get Ajax coming through, Atalanta last season? Part of the drama of the quarterfinals was the fact we had newcomers there, and it's new players fans might be discovering, or do actually those fans, would they just prefer to watch Ronaldo versus Messi, Mbappe versus Lewandowski on the same pitch as well? Or do we get sick of that after a time because it just becomes repetitive? How many people will only tune in to La Liga from overseas to the Clásicos? They're not necessarily watching Levante against Barcelona on a weekly basis. And then there's the additional workload on players. And I think, obviously the Premier League, we had the Premier League clubs meeting this week as well. And although, of course, the Big Six have their own agendas and, they're determined to try to reshape the Champions League in their vision, we certainly got the wider pushback, didn't we, from the Premier League in terms of how do they accommodate the extra 100 fixtures, expanded the Champions League from 6 to 10 rounds, and also in terms of the allocation of those extra spots, the fact they don't want to see the situation weakened where Liverpool in 6th place now would still potentially qualify for the Champions League in this scenario. So it's a question of how much can UEFA resist the leagues, how much can they resist the smaller clubs, or how much are they fearing the potential weight of Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG perhaps getting together, and what sway do they actually hold over UEFA in terms of being able to to try to get them to sway to their vision?
Well, these are the kind of dynamics at play in football politics as well, aren't they? Because if you remember, I think all three of us were in Athens the day Alexander Seferin was elected as UEFA president, and he made very clear that he wouldn't be the president for the big, but be the president for the medium and small-sized, be they national FAs or clubs. So it's a really fine balancing act there. If we're saying all this is going to be freighted in terms of what benefits the biggest clubs so they can play each other more and more and generate more revenue, how does that fit into the vision of the man who was elected UEFA president on a platform of being the champion of small and medium institutions? I think that's a question maybe he'll have to answer. And one of his points might be, well, I've arranged this third division tournament, this UEFA conference for these guys to play. But is that what they wanted? Is that it? Is that where the vision starts and finishes?
Well, it was a vision that first emerged in the final weeks of Michel Platini's presidency, a year before Alexander Seferin was elected as UEFA president in 2016. And now the challenge for UEFA is generating television revenue from all these additional European games. And the sale of TV rights is something on the minds of the Premier League at the moment, as they are in the midst of the auction for the rights from 2022 onwards. Particularly, they've got the domestic deal to do. And we've been hearing at the FT Summit this week from Claire Enders, the media analyst, who believes the Premier League need to move away from selling UK rights in 3-year cycles and move towards a more long-term vision to try to protect the revenue that they can generate in this very volatile market.
If I were the Premier League, I would exclude from my mind the fairy godmother story that seems to have kept their views extraordinarily short-term focused, and extraordinarily focused also, may I say, in the past, and they're entirely entitled to do this, on gaming their bidders so that they drive each other into a frenzy of suicide. Now, that is a scorched earth policy, which I swear will never work again. So I would go long-term, years to 7 years, symbiotic relationships, look at what's happened in the US with all of the major sports and say to myself, gosh, 10 years really looks great when you have an extraordinary, actually trying to do different things. You're trying to develop a new interest. You're trying to reclaim the under 25s, and you're trying to get them out there to get some sport. So if I were the Premier League, I would prioritize. I would see this as a crisis, an existential crisis. And I would say to myself every day, do I want to be golf? And then say, no, I don't want to do that. And then what am I going to do about that so I avoid being golf? And so I would be very, very innovative. Yeah, we will. I hope we'll see it.
Well, publicly at least, the Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters doesn't believe that they're facing any sort of crisis. And the sense we got from him at the FT Summit is that he's not really planning anything innovative either. He's sticking to selling in 3-year right cycles domestically. He also thought that the league isn't going to be impacted by the wider economic turbulence. He doesn't see that there's going to be some drop in the value of rights. Is he being excessively optimistic there?
Yeah, I mean, Richard Masters, he would say that he doesn't think the Premier League rights are going to go down or have plateaued. I mean, even though they went down 8% last time, the domestic rights, I think he would say that. And Simon Green from BT Sport, he would say that they are going to go down because that's what suits them both. But actually, I thought the more interesting thing was the Masters ruling out any idea of having longer than 3 years, because that's something I think both Sky and BT would like. That could, they do longer term deals for international rights to Premier League, but they resisted doing that for the domestic rights. And Masters said there were no plans to. It's going to be 3 years the next time. So I think that sort of removed something from the table, which some people in the media industry had thought would be a potentially attractive possibility to get some sort of long term stability, both for the leagues and for the broadcasters.
It's always that challenge for the Premier League in assessing where and forecasting the future, as in when to do a long-term deal. So if they think the market's going to dip, then it would make sense to lock broadcasters into a long-term arrangement, or if they see a depressed market, to think, well, actually, there could be an upturn in a few years' time. So they're really difficult judgment calls that they have to make in terms of what to do. Because, golf has done long-term deals in the States with NBC. The IOC has done long-term deals over the rights to its games with Discovery and NBC as well.
I found it quite surprising, to be honest, that it's so unequivocal on that point, given the state of the economy and what people are saying is the state of the rights market. I think common sense would suggest the longer term rights offer surety to whoever invests in them. They're talking about big money rights, billions of pounds, dollars, euros, whatever. And you're going to see ancillary investments from whoever buys those rights. I was quite surprised he was so, like I said, unequivocal about saying this is just not going to happen. Because Claire Enders from Enders Analysis, one of the companies that looks at these rights, she was asked in the Q&A session there, if I remember, what would you tell the Premier League if they could do one thing? And without a second thought, she said, just sell your rights for longer cycles, you make more money. And to be fair to Claire, she's been on the money over the years when it comes to forecasting the direction of travel.
Yeah, if you look at the Scandinavian deal that was done for the Premier League rights last year, I mean, that was remarkable. More than somewhere north of £2 billion but that's for 6 years. I mean, it's an amazing deal for the Premier League, and it came just before the pandemic, so it was perfectly timed. I don't think they probably wouldn't get that now, but I mean, look at that. That's for the Nordic nations. That's already in the bag, so maybe that's why Masters is fairly confident about the managing to at least keep pace with what they have overall, and maybe there will be an OTT platform comes in a bit more. Amazon they went in for the Serie A rights, I think, in a way they haven't won them, but and they're doing a bit of Champions League next season in Germany and Italy, so maybe Amazon will up the market a bit for the domestic rights. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Serie A. This was a big week for them. They had 2 bids on the table, one from Sky, long-time partner, for 750 million euros a season, and a bigger one from DAZN, speaking of cash-burning machines, for 850 million euros. And alongside that, they've had this offer from a group of funds led by CVC, which seems to be investing in every sport at the moment, for about 1.7 billion for 10% of the future TV rights. So a bunch of company teams that are cash strapped really want to go with the CVC money. And the well-run clubs have basically said, look, we're not going to do this. And they seem to be at a stalemate here, which is very Italian. The last TV rights sale also was in a bit of a mess. Speaking to people at DAZN, they're quite confused. There's, look, we've offered so much money, more than anyone else. Why don't they just take our cash? And I guess there is no easy answer. It is dealing with Italy, dealing with Serie A. The one good ray of hope, I suppose, is that those numbers aren't bad at all. 850 million from DAZN and 750 million from Sky at this moment in time, given what we saw that happen in France, is not the worst result at all. So potentially good news for others there, if you want to look at it glass half full. We should know in the next few days.
And the one thing we've got used to, which we've never had before in Britain, is every Premier League game being shown live on television during the pandemic. And we also had a view from the Championship at the FT Summit from Lungi Masebo, the Chief Operating Officer at Birmingham, just wondering how much fan habits might have changed by being able to watch so much on television, and the challenge going forward about bringing them back into the stadiums. She started by discussing the financial benefits for Birmingham by being able to sell Jude Bellingham to Borussia Dortmund for €25 million last year.
We had a big transfer last season, which has actually softened the blow in terms of our losses. That recovery, though, is going to be a long haul. We are also having to invest in our stadium at the moment at St Andrews, but that can actually only help with getting spectators back. And I think there's a question around, are supporters going to want to come back where they're actually used to consuming football at home now, through a TV screen or through their mobiles? And I think there's still very much a match day sort of feel around people coming back to stadiums. And I think the appetite will still be there for people, because I think it's a little bit more than what's happening on the pitch for the 90 minutes.
One other issue that came up at the FT Summit was of Mesut Ozil and his Arsenal career. And Tariq, who were you able to put a question to on that?
Yeah, it was interesting that it was the Arsenal chief executive, Vinay Venkatesham. He was on the diversity panel. And it was the first time I was sort of able to get an Arsenal executive maybe on the record about what actually happened in that incident when Mesut Ozil spoke up for that Uyghur minority who are facing what some people have described as a genocide in China. That led to a bit of a backlash in China that Arsenal quickly responded to and distanced themselves as fast as they could from comments from who at the time was one of their star players, in order to not, it seemed, offend people in China, their investors in China, a big market for them. And he was asked about it, and he kind of said, well, that was nothing to do with it. We were asked the question and we answered it. But that's not always the case, right, Rob? You've asked plenty of questions in your time. You don't always get an answer.
And he didn't originally answer the question put to him, and he was followed up on it by Murad Ahmed from the FT, who was hosting the session.
The club specifically made a statement after. You could have remained silent on it, but the club specifically made a statement, and it felt like at the time it was to do with maintaining your business in China over a political issue, which is a bit of a third rail. I mean, that's fair to say? You didn't you take a kind of a commercial view to the activism of one of your players?
No, I don't think that's fair to say that we took a commercial view. I know that that's how that has been reported, but I don't think it's fair to say we took a commercial view. So we were asked for comment around the situation, predominantly in China. We were asked for comment. We were asked for comment generally, and our position, as we often say, is this is a statement that a player has made in their individual capacity. So for us, it wasn't about a commercial driver behind that. It was simply around, I guess, being clear that this wasn't Mesut making a club statement. This was Mesut making a statement, as his is right, in an individual capacity.
Well, I mean, it's one of the classic thing. All clubs and leagues are terrified of doing anything which might provoke the hostility of the Chinese, because they think that is the really big untapped market. I mean, we had the issue with the NBA from over the Hong Kong riots there, the protests there. The NBA found themselves blacklisted for a time by Chinese TV. Ozil, as soon as he spoke out about the Uyghurs, the commentators just refused to mention his name. So, not surprisingly, Arsenal running scared in a way, because they. So it's perhaps not surprising that Arsenal are running scared, because they're terrified that they're going to be on the end of a similar sort of boycott by Chinese TV. And for, when you're looking at your future plans, and that includes developing your Chinese market, that could be potentially a very big problem.
It's a slippery slope then, right, Ziggs? Because you got you open yourselves up to accusations of potentially hypocrisy, etc., because you pick and choose the battles you're willing to fight based on where your income is coming from. That's perhaps that's just life, but it's quite stark when you see some of these things put side by side. It was interesting, actually. There's talk about an Olympic boycott, and China's backlash has been quite firm. There was a comment piece in a state-owned newspaper, the Global Times, in reaction to some of these calls for an Olympic boycott, to say, if you boycott us, we will notice, and you will get a reaction. Mark our words. And that I think is pretty strong talk when we're talking about a sporting event, and it kind of shows China's posture right now and its place in the world.
And before China hosts the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, we've got the rescheduled 2020 Summer Games in Japan. And last week we had the resignation of the Tokyo Games president in a sexism scandal. This week his successor has been appointed, and she's Shiko Hashimoto. She's not just been serving as Olympics minister, she's also the most successful multi-season athlete in Olympics history. She's competed at 4 Winter Games and 3 Summer Games. But she's now stepping into one of the most challenging Olympic roles ever, tasked with organising a Games already postponed once during the pandemic, and still facing ongoing doubts caused by the coronavirus.
Yeah, and trying to decide whether they actually should go ahead with them in the face of very significant national opposition, and also in some opposition involving some parts of the government. So yeah, talk about a difficult job to take on at short notice, but good luck to her. That's all you can say.
It was interesting, the IOC reaction again. It took so long to come to the right decision with the Japanese organisers here, because they were going to replace an 83-year-old man with an 84-year-old man until the obvious backlash led to this appointment. And it was interesting from the IOC's point of view. Initially, they said we should all move on after Mori had apologised, and then 2 weeks later said, this is a great thing, this is what should have happened after all, which shows you a little bit how that organisation is run.
Well, one organisation we're grateful for this week is the Financial Times. Thanks for allowing the use of clips from their superb Business of Football Summit this week. And thank you to everyone for listening to episode 5 of Sport Unlocked. If you've got any questions, issues you want us to explore in future episodes, drop us a line, sportunlockedpod@gmail.com, or tweet us at sportunlocked. And enjoy whatever sport you're viewing in the days ahead, and we'll hope to speak to you soon. Goodbye for now.